I think we're just about ready to gear up. Staff, are we ready? I believe so. With that, I will go ahead and call this joint meeting of Assembly Ways and Means and Senate Finance to order. If I could ask staff to call the roll, please.
Senator Brooks? Here. Senator Canizaro? Here. Senator Dennis? Here. Senator Dondero-Loop? Here. Senator Goycochea? Here. Senator Hammond? Here. Senator Keykefer? Here. Senator Ratty? Here. Senator Severs-Gansert? Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson? Here. Assemblyman Frierson? Here. Assemblywoman Gorlow? Here. Assemblyman Hafen? Here. Assemblywoman Howdegi? Here. Assemblyman Levitt? Here. Assemblywoman Miller? Here. Assemblywoman Monroe-Moreno? Here. Assemblywoman Peters? Assemblyman Roberts. Here. Assemblywoman Titus. Here. Assemblywoman Tolles. Here. Assemblyman Watts. Here. Chair Carlton.
And I am here. Good morning, everyone. We are here today to do budget closing of the Governor's Office, special appropriations, and to hear reports from a number of subcommittees. So with that, I believe we can go ahead and begin with the budget closing for special appropriations. Mr. Hartz.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning. For the record, Alex Hartz, Fiscal Analysis Division. I am presenting the Governor's Finance Office Special.
And Mr. Hartz, if you could get a little closer to the microphone, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, for the record, Alex Hartz, Fiscal Analysis Division. I am presenting the Special Appropriations Budget for the Governor's Finance Office. The budget begins on page 3. This budget was heard on February 22nd. There is one major closing issue, as you will see in the budget. The Governor recommends the addition of approximately $4.3 million. This in fiscal year 22. This would be in addition to the approximately $4.3 million that is in the base budget, for a total amount of funding over the biennium of just over $8.5 million. This funding is proposed to fund new as well as expand existing graduate medical education programs, which we refer to as slots, as graduate medical education residency and fellowship training locations within the state. There's information provided on page 4, which gives information about that was provided by the agency as a result of the budget hearing on the 22nd, in terms of there being 194 total residency and fellowship slots currently in this, as of 2020, calendar year 2020, in the state, 139 in southern Nevada, 54 in northern Nevada. As you will see in the second bullet, there is a considerable difference in price range depending upon the residency or fellowship, and that impacts the total number that would be approved and added to the program. On the page 5, there's information that was provided by the Governor's Office of Science, Innovation, and Technology with regard to where the sponsors, or where the graduate medical education residencies and fellowships are located through, and the type of residency program in terms of the area of residency in medicine, and then the fellowship programs. The Governor also recommends, as part of this request, to add language in the Appropriations Act, back language that would allow funding to be balanced, unspent funding to be balanced forward from fiscal year 2022 to fiscal year 23, given that there takes time to develop and fund new residency and fellowship slots. This flexibility has not previously been requested by the Office of the Governor, nor has it been considered by the money committees, but it does not appear unreasonable given how the residency slots and fellowship slots are developed and then funded. On the top of page 6 is the motion for the committee's consideration. Do the committees wish to approve the Governor's recommendation of $4,265,000 in new general fund appropriations in fiscal year 2022 to fund the development of new graduate medical education residency and fellowship slots in Nevada. If the committees approve the funding, do the committees wish to direct staff to include language in the 21-23 Biennium Appropriations Act such that the full $8,530,000 in appropriations for the GME program are available to be expended in both years of the biennium, and then any unspent balance on June 30, 2023 reverts to the general fund? Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hartz. And I remember the session where former Assemblyman Eisen would give me a lecture almost every day on GME. So I'm hoping he's very happy to see this, because this is an issue that the state has been dealing with, and this really does make a difference in access to health care in the state. So committee members, are there any questions on this program at this time? I'm kind of waiting for Dr. Titus to raise her hand, but that's not happening yet. So any other questions? No? So with that, Senator Brooks?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to approve the governor's recommendation of $4,265,000 in new general fund appropriations in FY 2022 to fund the development of new graduate medical education residency and fellowship slots in Nevada, with staff to include language in the 21-23 Biennium Appropriations Act such that the full $8,530,000 in appropriations for the GME program are available to be expended in both years of the biennium, and that any unspent balance on June 30th, 2023 reverts to the general fund.
I have a motion from Chair Brooks, a second from Vice Chair Monroe Moreno. Committee members, are there any questions or comments on the motion? I'm not seeing any. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And any in opposition? Hearing no opposition, passes unanimously of all the members present. The other closing items, Mr. Hartz?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are 4 other closing items that are listed for the committee's review. They all appear reasonable to staff in so much as that they are continuing funding that has previously been recommended by the governor and approved by the committees. Staff would note that on other closing item number 3, the governor recommends that language be added to the 21-23 Biennium Appropriations Act, establishing the appropriations are available in both fiscal year 22 and 23, with any unspent balance of the appropriation reverting on or before in this September 15th, 2023. Staff would note that both the 2017 legislature and the 2019 legislature approved similar back language that is being requested for the Civil Air Patrol. Fiscal staff recommends other closing items 1 through 4 be closed as recommended by the governor, inclusive of the recommended 2021-23 Biennium Appropriations Act language for the Civil Air Patrol, and requests authority to make technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you very much, committee members. Any questions at this time? I don't believe I see anyone wishing to be recognized, so Senator Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that other closing items 1 through 4 be closed as recommended by the governor, inclusive of the recommended 21-23 Biennium Appropriations Act language for the Civil Air Patrol, and request authority for staff to make technical adjustments as necessary.
I have a motion from Chair Brooks. I have a second from Vice Chair Monroe Moreno. Are there any questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And any in opposition? Hearing no opposition, passes unanimously of the members present. Thank you very much, Mr. Hartz. And, committee members, hopefully in future days, when you have this particular budget, that list might be a little bit longer, so we can do a little bit more work in the state. But at this time, it's a short list, but it's very important in getting important work done. So with that, I believe we can move on to the subcommittee reports to the full committee. So we'll give staff a moment to disperse the reports. I'm going to give them a minute. So committee, we're still at ease for a few moments. So I think we're back. A lot of information in front of us here. So with that, good morning, Ms. Mangola. Are you my first batter up or? Okay, that's great.
That's correct,
So-
Madam Chair.
And Mr. Drost will be in the batter's box just in case we need him. All righty, so Ms. Mangola, please proceed.
Thank you. Good morning. For the record, Jane Marie Mangoba from the Fiscal Analysis Division, and I'm here along with Mr. Joss to present the Joint Subcommittee on K-12 Higher Education CIP Closing Report for the Department of Education. The Joint Subcommittee on K-12 Higher Education CIP has completed its review of the Department of Education budget recommendation in the executive budget for the 2021-23 biennium. The closing recommendations of the Senate members of the subcommittee resulted in an increase in general fund appropriations of $286,394 in fiscal year 22 and $392,100 in fiscal year 23 when compared to the governor's recommended budget. This does not include the department-wide indirect cost allocation adjustments. The closing recommendations of the assembly members of the subcommittee resulted in an increase in general fund appropriations of $245,639 in fiscal year 22 and $378,145 in fiscal year 23 when compared to the governor's recommended budget. This also does not include the department-wide indirect cost allocation adjustments. The subcommittee recommended approval of the following closing actions, starting with the educational trust account. The subcommittee recommended approval of expenditures totaling $14,870 in fiscal year 22 and $24,870 in fiscal year 23 to support the State Teacher of the Year program, the Interstate Commission for Military Children, and the Parental Involvement Summit as recommended by the governor in the base budget. However, the subcommittee recommended transferring the expenditures associated with the State Teacher of the Year program to the department's Professional Development Programs budget and the Interstate Commission for Military Children and the Parental Involvement Summit expenditures to the department's Parental Involvement and Family Engagement budget. The subcommittee also recommended these expenditures be funded with general fund appropriations totaling $14,870 in fiscal year 22 and $24,870 in fiscal year 23 in those department budgets. The subcommittee recommended not approving the governor's recommendation for expenditures of $105,119 in each year of the 2021-23 biennium to continue the Educator in Residence Graduate Assistant Fellowship Program. The subcommittee also recommended legislation to require the year-end transfers of the unredeemed or uncharged value of expired or abandoned gift certificates held by the Abandoned Property Trust account be transferred to the new state education funding account to support the pupil-centered funding plan beginning in fiscal year 22. The subcommittee also recommended the elimination of the Educational Trust account at the end of fiscal year 21, with any remaining funding transferred to the state education funding account. The next budget is the Office of the Superintendent. The subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation to continue funding for both an administrative services officer position and a management analyst position as recommended by the governor, funded with general fund appropriations of $493,121 over the 2021-23 biennium. The Office of the Superintendent budget had a closing difference related to the governor's recommendation for general fund appropriations of $30,000 in each year of the 2021-23 biennium for 2-day monthly in-person meetings for the Commission on School Funding. The Senate members of the subcommittee recommended approval of funding of $30,000 in fiscal year 22 and $7,500 in fiscal year 23 that would allow 2-day monthly in-person meetings from July 1st, 2021 through September 30, 2022 for the Commission on School Funding, while the Assembly members of the subcommittee recommended not approving the governor's recommendation for general fund appropriations of $30,000 in each year of the 2021-23 biennium for in-state travel expenditures for 2-day monthly in-person meetings for the Commission on School Funding. The Commission on School Funding has been conducting its meetings virtually since April of 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. During the budget hearing on March 9th, the department indicated the Commission on School Funding struggled to have meetings virtually and expressed concerns that members of the public may not be provided the opportunity to participate in virtual meetings. During the closing of this budget before the subcommittee on April 27th, the Senate members of the subcommittee approved funding that would allow 2-day monthly in-person meetings from July 1st, 2021 through September 30, 2022 to align the Commission on School Funding meetings with interim committees, which only meet during the interim period between legislative sessions. During the budget closing, members of the subcommittee requested additional information regarding conducting a combination of in-person and virtual meetings for the Commission on School Funding, since the Commission has been able to conduct its meeting virtually since April 2020. Accordingly, the money committees could consider an option to reduce funding by 1/2 to provide for in-person meetings only every other month in fiscal year 22 and 2 in-person meetings through September 2022 in fiscal year 23. Fiscal staff estimates this option would reflect in-state travel funding for the Commission on School Funding of $15,000 in fiscal year 22 and $5,000 in fiscal year 23. There are 4 options for the committee's consideration today. A is approved funding of $30,000 in each year of the 2021-23 biennium for 2-day monthly in-person meetings for the Commission on School Funding as recommended by the governor. Option B is approve funding of $30,000 in fiscal year 22 and $7,500 in fiscal year 23 for a 2-day monthly in-person meetings from July 1st, 2021 through September 30th, 2022 for the Commission on School Funding. Option C is not to approve the governor's recommendation to increase general fund appropriations by $30,000 in each year of the 2021-23 biennium for in-state travel expenditures for a 2-day monthly in-person meetings for the Commission on School Funding. And the last option, option D, is approve funding of $15,000 in fiscal year 22 and $5,000 in fiscal year 23, which would provide 2-day in-person meetings every other month in fiscal year 22 and two-day in-person meetings through September of 2022 in fiscal year 23 for the Commission on School Funding. And Madam Chair, I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have, unless you want me to go through.
No,
and
I think
continue on with the
stopping here
document.
at this moment to have the conversation for the two full committees would be appropriate, and then we'll move on to the next decision points and go through. So, full committee members, there was conversation in the subcommittee about this item. We did, the Assembly did close separately from the Senate. The Majority Leader in the Assembly had some questions about the funding of this, managing the meetings, and the Senate was comfortable with what had been recommended. So we're going to go ahead and, as would be normal, we will continue the conversation here on what's going on. So the full committee has the benefit of what the subcommittee discussed, and then we'll move from there. So if I'll go ahead and go to the Majority Leader first to share some of the concerns that were brought up in the committee, and then we'll go and open it up to other members for questions at that time. So, Majority Leader?
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And so, as I look at this, though, the option that seems to resonate the most with me is option D. And it wasn't necessarily so much the money amount, because this is not a big amount of money. But, like as the interim finance committee, when we're in our traditional schedule, we're only meeting every other month for a full day to, conduct the state's business and work over all the budgets and work programs. And so it seemed to me that every other month is more reasonable. The bulk of the work has been, over this interim has been worked on, and we've got some decisions points based on that in front of this legislature and coming conversations. But I don't think we need to it just doesn't make any sense to me why we would keep at that same pace and ask those members on that commission who are from other school districts to give up 2 days a month to participate in this meeting. 2 days every other month seems much more reasonable. So D seems to me what a reasonable expectation.
And thank you. And we do know that there is going to be a lot of work that still needs to be done. I mean, the model is just being stood up. There's going to be a lot of work, a lot of discussion points that are going to happen over the next 2 years. So we understand how valuable that is, but at what level? So with that, I'll open it up to other members at this time. Senator Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that as we move forward, we're standing up a new funding formula. We are in maybe the most uncertain economic times that state's ever faced. We have a massive influx of federal money that is coming into the state, going directly to school districts, and we just have so much work to do, and that's why I'm supportive of the in-person monthly meetings through September 22nd or September 30th of 2022 in conjunction with our legislative schedule. I just think that there's just going to be so much work necessary, and on this commission we have the CFOs for rural school districts that need to be able to weigh in and be able to give input on how we proceed. And so I just think this next 2 years is going to be so incredibly critical in how we go about implementing a new funding formula and taking into consideration all of the federal funds that are going directly to school districts and into the state's general fund as well. So that's why I'm supportive of that more robust and in-person meeting schedule through these next 2 years. After that, obviously, I think that it should be up for reconsideration on what the future looks like. But that's where I'm at.
Any other questions or comments from other committee members at this time? Senator Dondero Loop.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I too would weigh in and think that the in-person meetings are important, especially for all of our CFOs to be able to get together. While I recognize that a lot of things have been done virtual in the last year, I think that the in-person meetings are very beneficial, and I'd like to see them have the opportunity to get together and move forward this commission and our new funding formula. So I would agree that a little bit more of the in-person meetings when we're out of session are beneficial to them. Thank you.
Senator Dennis.
Thank you. I figured I would weigh in on this since I was the one that created this commission. As we looked at when we were creating the new funding formula, one of the things that was critical is that our past, in the past, for us to talk about school funding, it basically came down to us talking about it every 2 years in the legislature, and we didn't really have a way of being able to have experts look at this, and then we would either do an expensive study periodically to see if we made adjustments, so what this commission did was bring together CFOs and technical people that this is what they do. The majority leader earlier mentioned, having them in meetings for 2 days, but this is what they do for a living, and they do it. If you look at the work product that they've been doing over the last 2 years, they've done an amazing job, and I agree that there's a lot that has to happen, especially now, to stand this up and get it going. So I would, I support having them be able to meet and get done the work that they need to get done. It saves us a lot of time when it comes back to the legislature and we have to talk about these things, because we know we're going to have good data and good information from these technical people that get together. So just wanted to put that out there, maybe give some historical on why we created it.
Other comments from other committee members at this time? Ms. Monroe Moreno.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate the conversation that we've had and the opinions given. I don't see anything that would prevent this commission from getting together virtually. The one thing we have learned as we've lived through this pandemic is that we can get a lot of work done virtually. And by asking people to take 2 days off every month to participate in a commission, if there are educators on that commission, they may not be paid for those 2 days that they're traveling to participate in this commission. However, they may be able to participate virtually from their classroom and an office. The CEOs that were mentioned about the rural communities would be better able to participate and not have the travel, the expense. And when you talk about the public being involved, we've seen during this legislative session, we've had a number of people, probably more people involved, because they could participate from their homes, from their office, not just in the state of Nevada, but nationwide. So I would be inclined to agree with the majority leader from the Assembly that the 2 days every other month in person would be the option that I would be voting for, but I don't see anything in that option that would prevent them from getting together virtually if they choose more often.
Other members of the committee at this time? So it seems as though we have a bit of a difference of opinion on this one. So what the chair's intent would be is to go ahead and take the motion on the Assembly side, knowing full well what direction it's going to go on the Senate side, and then the chair of the Senate Finance will take their motion, and then we will be closing differently and moving on to have further conversations. And I think there's still some discussion points as far as building in the virtual meetings. So we can go from that. It's kind of what I'm reading the committee at this moment. So I think rather than spend more time on this right now, we can go forward with that. Senator Severs-Ganser, did you have a question?
Thanks, Chair Carlton. I just have one other comment. Maybe the folks on the commission could consider, before, we're going to move forward right now and have separate opinions, but maybe they can consider making it a one-day meeting instead of a two-day meeting. And so maybe they need to analyze basically how they approach the work that they're doing and if they can do it more expeditiously, because that may end up factoring into what we eventually land on. Thank you.
And that, any ideas or options that committee members have as far as moving forward with this? We'd like to be able to put everything on the table, and we'll have further discussion and go from there. I think that's perfectly reasonable. Senator Dondero-Loop.
Thank you, Madam Chair, just for a second time. I do believe that and I could be wrong, but I do believe that the commission actually was hoping for some in-person meetings because they felt more productive in those in-person meetings. So that's what I'm taking into my factor. And all of the members of the commission are CFOs and business people from the community, I guess, and not necessarily classroom teachers, but that's what I'm taking into my decision is the request from the actual people doing the work.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate that. So with that, staff is prepared so they kind of know what direction we're going. We always want to make sure everything is clear. So with that, I would accept a motion from Ms. Benitez-Thompson. Ms. Benitez-Thompson?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I would move that we approve D, approve funding of $15,000 in fiscal year 2020 and $5,000 in fiscal year 2023, which would provide 2 in-person meetings every other month in 2022 and 2 two-day in-person meetings through September 2022 and fiscal year 2023 for the Commission on School Funding.
So I have a motion from Ms. Benitez-Thompson, a second from Speaker Frierson. Comments on the motion? Speaker Frierson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to be clear for the public's edification, because we're talking about options, and I don't want to assume that everybody knows what we're talking about. All of these options include in-person meetings. So I don't want anybody to think that we're talking about in-person meetings versus not in-person meetings. All of these options that we're discussing include in-person meetings. So we certainly understand and agree that there's a need for some in-person meetings. I think that the issue is the frequency with which those in-person meetings occur. And quite frankly, I think the other discussion is whether or not there is an option for virtual in between those. So I just wanted to be clear, because for folks that are not reading these notes, they don't know what we're talking about, quite frankly.
Right.
So all of the options that we were considering were including in-person meetings, but to the extent that we have to continue to have the conversations about the frequency, I think that's what we're talking about now.
And thank you, speakers. So with that, and the conversation about the public being able to participate, we definitely want that. But we have found out with all those IFC meetings that we had over the last interim, the public will figure it out, and they have figured out our session also. So we have had, I believe, even more participation the first couple of months of our session than we ever expected that we would have. So I do have a motion and a second. So I'll go ahead and call for the motion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed? Nay. So the nays would be, if you would raise your hands, please, that way we have them. So the nays are in this, the Senate votes nay, and the Assembly, and I have a nay from Dr. Titus in the Assembly. So the motion does pass only on the Assembly side. So with that, Senator Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would accept a motion on the options that we just discussed for a commission meeting.
I would move for option B.
Yeah. And I have a motion second from Senator Kiefer. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, aye? Aye. And all again opposed, nay? Nay. And will the ayes raise their hand? I think it'll make it a little easier. We've got the Senate votes in the affirmative, in addition to Dr. Titus, and so the motion passes in the Senate, fails in the Assembly.
I believe we've made that as clear as we possibly can. So with that, we can go ahead and move on. Ms. Mangola.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Continuing on to the bottom of page 4, the Office of the Superintendent Budget had another closing difference related to the governor's recommendation to increase general fund appropriations by $10,755 in each year of the 2021-23 biennium for operating and travel expenditures for department staff providing administrative support for the Commission on School Funding, which includes $6,020 in each year for 2 department staff to attend 7 Commission School Funding in-person meetings in Las Vegas. The Senate members of the subcommittee recommended approval of funding of $10,755 in fiscal year 22 and $6,455 in fiscal year 23 for operating expenditures and for department staff to attend 7 Commission on School Funding in-person meetings in fiscal year 22 and 2 in-person meetings in fiscal year 23 in Las Vegas. While the Assembly members of the subcommittee recommended not approving the governor's recommendation to increase general fund appropriations by $10,755 in each year of the 2021-23 biennium for operating and travel expenditures for department staff to attend 7 Commission on School Funding in-person meetings. As previously noted, during the budget closing, members of the subcommittee requested additional information regarding conducting a combination of in-person and virtual meetings for the Commission on School Funding. Accordingly, the money committees could consider an option to reduce funding by 1/2 to provide for in-person meetings during those times the Commission on School Funding meets in person in Las Vegas in fiscal year 22 and 1 in-person meeting through September 2022 in fiscal year 23 for the department staff providing support for the Commission on School Funding. Fiscal staff estimates this option would require expenditures of $7,745 in fiscal year 22 and $5,595 in fiscal year 23. So there are 4 options for the committee's consideration. A is to approve funding of $10,755 in each year of the 2021-23 biennium for operating and travel expenditures for department staff to attend 7 Commission on School Funding in-person meetings as recommended by the governor. Option B is approved funding of $10,755 in fiscal year 22 and $6,455 in fiscal year 23 for operating expenditures and for department staff to attend 7 Commission on School Funding in-person meetings in fiscal year 22 and 2 in-person meetings in fiscal year 23 in Las Vegas. Option C is not approved the governor's recommendation to increase general fund appropriations by $10,755 in each year of the 2021-23 biennium for operating and in-state travel expenditures for department staff to attend 7 Commission on School Funding in-person meetings in Las Vegas. And option D is approved funding of $7,745 in fiscal year 22 and $5,595 in fiscal year 23, which would provide for department staff to attend meetings in person during those times the Commission on School Funding meets in Las Vegas in fiscal year 22 and 1 in-person meeting in Las Vegas in fiscal year 23 for the period beginning July 1st through September 30th of 2022. And Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
And thank you very much, Ms. Mangola, because there's so many different options here. The action that the Assembly took just a few moments ago in item number D. It doesn't specifically say the number of meetings, and I just want to make sure that the Assembly is consistent with its previous action that it just took. So my question to you, Ms. Mangola, would be, because the Assembly had gone with item number D, which was 2-day in-person meetings every other month, and then 2 in-person meetings through September, is that the 7 meetings, because it's not specifically delineated, that are referenced in this discussion on those 7 meetings for, because this is the staff being able to attend those meetings. So we just want to make sure that we are consistent with where we are. So if you could walk us through that, please. I want to make sure our motions aren't contradictory to what we're trying to get to.
So option D on page 6 would allow department staff to meet in person in Las Vegas approximately 3 to 4 times in fiscal year 22, and would allow 1 in-person meeting to go to Las Vegas in fiscal year 23. The option that the Assembly Committee chose for the Commission on School Funding on the previous page, on page 4, would allow in-person meetings for the Commission on School Funding 6 times in fiscal year 22 and 2 times in fiscal year 23. Now, that 6 times in-person meetings can all be in Las Vegas, but at this time, staff is unsure whether the Commission on School Funding would opt to go to utilize that for Las Vegas meetings as opposed to in-person meetings in Carson City.
And thank you
I
very
hope
much,
that
Ms. Mangola,
makes
because
it
the
clear.
number of meetings wasn't actually delineated in either of these. We would just have to figure out how many they were. Seeing the writing on the wall, this was going to have future conversations as we move forward. I just wanted to make sure the Assembly took the appropriate action that would match our previous action, which was to support in-person meetings, but not quite as many. This is for staff funding to go to those meetings. We really don't know how many will be in Las Vegas. So I believe the Assembly would want to look at item number D moving forward. We wouldn't want to say that there's no travel dollars at all. We don't think that is where we want to go. So I believe that item D in this list of options would be consistent with our previous action. Senator Brooks, did you have any questions of Ms. Mangola?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. A similar question, and the Senate's decision was to support monthly in-person meetings, and with item, that would have been a choice on item B in the previous decision. Would item B in this decision be supportive of staff support of those meetings, including meetings down in Southern Nevada where most of the children and teachers are?
For the record, Jamie Mangoba, that is correct, Senator. This would align with the Senate decision in option B of the previous page, on page 4 for the Commission School Funding.
And thank you very much, Ms. Mangola. And I think this is a perfect example of the Senate and the Assembly not agreeing, but we're still being agreeable and moving forward. So we just want to make sure that we have our actions clear for the record and everyone knows where we're going. So with that, to Co-Chair Brooks, I'll go ahead and move forward. We're not going to draw this out any longer than we need to. Like I said, the writing's on the wall. So with that, I would accept a motion from the Assembly to approve item D. Ms. Bedinas-Thompson?
So moved.
I have a motion from Ms. Bedinas-Thompson, a second from Speaker Frierson. Are there any questions or comments on the motion? Not seeing any at this time. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed? I have Dr. Titus on the Assembly side opposed, and the Senate as a whole opposed. So bipartisanship, there you go. So with that, the motion passes on the Assembly side and fails on the Senate side. Senator Brooks, you're up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would accept a motion on the options for travel expenses and support for staff.
So moved.
Which one?
I would make a motion that we go with B.
Thank you, Senator Dennis. I have a motion to go with B. Do I have a second? Senator Kiefer. And any discussion on that motion? All in favor, aye. All opposed, nay? And so will the ayes raise their hand, please? It's Dr. Titus and the members of the Senate, so that passes in the Senate. That motion passes in the Senate, fails in the Assembly. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And with that, Ms. Mangola, thank you so much for being there. We appreciate your work. With that, if you could go ahead and proceed, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Continuing on page 6, the Assessments and Accountability Budget, the subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation to continue the administration of the measure of academic progress reading assessments funded with general fund appropriations of $1 million in each year of the 2021-23 biennium. The subcommittee also recommended approval of the governor's recommendation to eliminate funding for end-of-course exams that are typically administered to students once they complete certain high school level math and English language art courses, contingent upon passage of Senate Bill 76 or other enabling legislation. The subcommittee recommended this budget also retain the ability to transfer general fund appropriations between fiscal years in the 2021-23 biennium with interim finance committee approval, and enabling language will be included in the 2021 Appropriations Act. The next budget is the Data Systems Management Budget. The governor's recommended base budget for the 2021-23 biennium includes general fund appropriations of $40,000 in fiscal year 22 for system costs associated with virtual auditing of hospitals or other licensed facilities that receive reimbursement for educational services pursuant to NRS 387.1225. After the Data Systems Management Budget was closed by the subcommittee on April 21st, the Governor's Finance Office requested the department be provided with the ability to balance forward any remaining general fund appropriations from this expenditure in fiscal year 22 into fiscal year 23 with interim finance committee approval with enabling language included in the 2021 Appropriations Act. So the decision for the committee today is, do the committees wish to provide authority in the Appropriations Act for the department to balance forward any remaining general fund appropriations related to virtual auditing of hospital or other licensed facilities in fiscal year 22 into fiscal year 23 for the Data Systems Management account? And Mr. Dross and I will be happy to answer any questions you may have, Madam Chair.
And thank you very much, Ms. Mangola. Committee members, are there any questions on this? This is one of those where they're asking for permission to be able to balance forward and use those dollars moving forward. Now, Ms. Mangola, we're not talking about them pulling dollars down from the second year into the first year. We're just talking about rolling dollars from the first year into the second year if they're not used.
You are correct, Madam Chair. This would just provide them the ability, any unexpended in fiscal year 22 to be rolled over or balanced forward in the next year.
Thank you. And I know with auditing functions, sometimes the work is done at a different paces, so I would be comfortable with this. So, Assemblywoman Miller.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question, and it may just result in a clarifying response. Under the data systems management, when it talks about associated costs with virtual auditing of hospitals and other licensed facilities, are we accessing all of the TANF funds and other funds available for this? Or is this something that is drawn down from our budget? And if you could explain an example of what one of those costs would be when we're talking about auditing of hospitals.
And Ms. Mangola, if you would elaborate on what the actual program is. We're not actually auditing the hospitals, it's my understanding. We're auditing the educational functions within the hospital. So if we could just give the committee members who are not on the subcommittee an idea of what the actual program is, and we can move forward from there.
Madam Chair, I will defer that question to Mr. Joss, who is the expert on this account.
Mr. Dross, time to come out of the batter's box. Here you go.
Madam Chair, for the record, Adam Dross with the LCB Fiscal Analysis Division. For background, this budget reflects the department's costs associated with various systems, including Infinite Campus. And NRS 387-1225 authorizes certain hospitals and other facilities that provide residential treatment to children that also operate as educational programs to request reimbursement from the Department of Education for the cost of providing those educational services. And that includes those education of pupils with disabilities receiving reimbursement. These virtual audits just ensure that the children placed at these facilities are receiving proper education and services and eligible for reimbursement from the department. These remote audits share information electronically, review records, and verify documentation, and it may also lead to follow-up or in-person audit. This work began in the current biennium, and the governor has recommended that the continuation of these monitoring system continue in the upcoming biennium, which includes a hospital portal, attendance reporting, and uploading of student records, as well as a parent portal. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any follow-up, Ms. Miller? Thank you very much, Mr. Drost. There's education almost everywhere, so. With that, committee members, any other questions or comments at this time? Not seeing any. I would go ahead and accept a motion. Senator Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to provide authority in the Appropriations Act for the department to balance forward any remaining general fund appropriations related to virtual auditing of hospitals or other licensed facilities in FY 2022 into FY 2023 for the Data Systems Management account.
I have a motion from Senator Brooks, a second from Ms. Monroe Moreno. Any questions or comments on the motion? Not seeing any. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And any in opposition? Hearing no opposition, passes unanimously of all members present. Moving on to the next item, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Continuing at the bottom of page 7 is the educator licensure budget. The subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation to reclassify one program officer position to a chief compliance investigator position and one administrative assistant position to a compliance investigator position, funded with reserve reductions of $8,839 over the 2021-23 biennium. The next budget is the educator effectiveness budget. The subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation to transfer one education program's professional position from the educator effectiveness budget to the educator licensure budget and fund the position with educator license fee reserves totaling $195,384 over the 2021-23 biennium in the educator licensure budget. The governor's recommended base budget includes general fund appropriations of $21,500 in fiscal year 22 to administer and monitor programs related to financial literacy. After the educator effectiveness budget was closed by the subcommittee on April 21st, the governor's finance office requested the department be provided with the ability to balance forward any remaining general fund appropriations from these expenditures in fiscal year 22 into fiscal year 23 with interim finance committee approval, with enabling language included in the 2021 Appropriations Act. So a decision point for the committee today, again, is do the committees wish to provide authority in the Appropriations Act for the department to balance forward any remaining general fund appropriations related to administering and monitoring financial literacy programs in fiscal year 22 into fiscal year 23 for the educator effectiveness account? And I'll be happy to answer any questions, Madam Chair, you may have.
Thank you very much. Committee members, are there any questions or comments on this? Pretty much the same conversation that we just had. In order to be able to monitor, allow the dollars to go from the first year into the second year. Seeing no questions or comments, Senator Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that we provide authority in the Appropriations Act for the department to balance forward any remaining general fund appropriations related to administering and monitoring financial literacy programs in fiscal year 2022 into fiscal year 2023 for the educator effectiveness account.
I have a motion from Senator Brooks, a second from Vice Chair Monroe Moreno. Are there any questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And any in opposition? Hearing no opposition, passes unanimously of the members present. And the part I liked the best about that one was with interim finance committee approval. So that gives us a level of comfort of being able to move forward. Moving on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Continuing on page 9 is the Office of Early Learning and Development budget. The subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation to restore general fund appropriations of $6.2 million in each year of the 2021-23 biennium for the state pre-K program and change the funding methodology using a standard per seat cost of $8,410 that would fund approximately 2,349 full-day pre-K seats. The subcommittee also recommended the issuance of a letter of intent directing the department to provide an update to the Interim Finance Committee on its work to examine equity adjustments for various pre-K programs and any future changes recommended for the standard per seat cost for the state pre-K program. The subcommittee further recommended approval of the governor's recommendation to change the funding of 2 existing positions from 100% federal funds to 50% general funds and 50% federal funds. The next budget is the student and school support budget. The subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation to add 1 new education programs professional position funded with Title IV Part A grant funds of $38,608 and reductions in expenditures for a contract position totaling $170,716 over the 2021-23 biennium. The subcommittee further recommended approval of the governor's recommendation to restore the funding for external evaluations funded with a general fund appropriation of $165,000 in fiscal year 23, in addition to the $100,000 provided in the base budget, and recommended that the money committees issue a letter of intent requiring the department to provide copies of the external evaluation reports conducted on state-funded programs to the Interim Finance Committee no later than January 1st of 2023. Finally, the subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation to restore the funding for the Nevada Commission on Mentoring, funded with general fund appropriations of $25,000 in each year of the 2021-23 biennium. The next budget is the literacy programs budget. The subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation to continue the literacy programs budget, including 3 full-time positions, contingent upon approval of the governor's recommendation to restore the funding for the Read by Grade 3 program in the other state education programs account. The next budget is the COVID-19 funding.
Ms. Mangola,
budget.
if I could stop you for just a moment. You're just going through this lickety-split. So I believe there might have been a question on the state pre-K program. We had some members, and I was a little slow on the uptake. They're wishing to be recognized. So with that, there were questions on pre-K. Yes, Ms. Hadigi.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Mangola. I just had a quick question because I was looking at my notes and I don't have it written, but was there a wait list for the pre-K program, or are all of the 2,349 seats full?
For the record, J.B. Mangoba, I apologize, but staff is not aware if there was any waiting list. And with your indulgence, Madam Chair, I believe the Department of Education is online and could probably speak or provide an accurate response to that question.
And thank you, Ms. Mango. But Assemblywoman Hadigi, would you like to have the department come up and address that for you?
If you don't mind, and if Chair, if you'd like, they can send it to me offline, whatever.
No, that's fine. Let's get it on the record right now.
Thank you, Chair.
Good morning, Superintendent. Did you need the question repeated, or are you prepared?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Superintendent Ebert, for the record. Prior to the pandemic, we did have wait lists across the entire state for PK seats. During the pandemic, the seat count did drop, but so we do expect there to be an increase with expanded in-person pre-K.
Okay, thank you. Any follow-up? Assemblywoman Howdigy, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, for your indulgence. I know this isn't a hearing, but I just don't see it in my notes. And so, Superintendent Ebert, do you know what that wait list number was? How many children were waiting to enter the program?
Thank you for the question. Superintendent Ebert, for the record, I do not have that number in front of me, but I'd be more than happy to provide the committee the information.
And thank you, Superintendent. If you would just go ahead and be sure and send that to our staff, and then we'll make sure all committee members get the answer. Thank you very much. We appreciate you being there to answer the question for us this morning. So with that, committee members, I don't believe anyone had any questions on the student and school support or the literacy program. So we, Ms. Mangola, if you'd like to go ahead and address the COVID-19 funding, and I know there are going to be a number of questions on this, so if you would walk us through this, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The COVID-19 funding budget, the subcommittee recommended approval of Budget Amendment A2158-52710, Budget Amendment A2158-62710, and Budget Amendment A216302710 that recommended establishing this budget with total federal funding of $1.3 billion provided to address pre-K to 12 issues related to COVID-19 pandemic. Based on the subcommittee's recommendation, this budget would be included in the 2021 Authorizations Act, which would, within the limitations of the Nevada Revised Statutes 353.220 and 353.335, be subject certain changes within this new budget to review and approval by the Interim Finance Committee. The subcommittee recommended placing American Rescue Plan Act elementary and secondary school emergency relief funding of $56.8 million in reserve, which is related to items not yet identified for expenditure, as well as funding for the Incentives for High School Students program and the Youth Career Pathways platform in this budget's reserve. By placing the funding in reserve, the department will need to approach the Interim Finance Committee, present additional details for these planned expenditures, and request approval before expending that funding. As recommended in Budget Amendment A2158-62710, the subcommittee recommended approval of expenditures of $8 million for the Donors Choose project, which is a website where teachers can post classroom project requests and donors can choose the projects they wish to support. The department plans to fund approximately 10,000 projects for an average cost of $800 per project, using $8 million in American Rescue Plan Act elementary and secondary school emergency relief funding, in short, ARP funding. Although recommended for approval by the subcommittee, members requested additional information regarding the fees that would be charged to the state by Donors Choose. Typically, Donors Choose charges the following for each funded project: a 15% partnership cost to support the organization's mission, a 1.5% third-party payment processing fee, and a flat $30 fee to cover the cost of fulfilling the project, and a state sales tax. The department indicates it met with Donors Choose on April 23rd, and all fees will be charged for the state funding projects. However, Donors Choose agreed to reduce the 15% partnership cost to 10% for the state-funded projects. The subcommittee also recommended the department distribute the planned Governor's Emergency Education Relief Funding of $3.2 million for pre-K seats based on the final distribution methodology approved by the 2021 legislature for the state pre-K program. Finally, the subcommittee recommended various technical adjustments to these budget amendments and provided fiscal staff with authority to make other technical adjustments as necessary.
I'm going to
The
stop you there, Ms.
subcommittee-
Mangola.
Oh.
We're going to take a break. I don't want you to get that far ahead of us, and I know what the last page is going to be. So I know there's going to be questions about a couple of the different items. I believe there were questions and concerns brought up at the subcommittee level on the incentives for high school students program and the youth career pathways platform. I believe a couple members of the Senate had some questions, so I'd like to go to Senator Kickheffer if he'd like to address those at this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I recall our subcommittee and as I see in this document, the recommendation out of the subcommittee was to place that into reserve. So that would still have to come back to the Interim Finance Committee for final approval, if I'm reading that correctly. Is that right, Ms. Mangoba? That looks like a nod.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Drost.
to confirm, yes, that is correct. The high school incentive program funding and the youth career pathways platform funding was placed in reserve, which would require the department to come to IFC and request approval before using that funding.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I'm going to continue to have a lot of questions about that initiative, but with having it placed into reserve gives me comfort at this point. Thank you.
And thank you, Senator Kickheffer. And I know it was a little bit of a surprise to the members of the subcommittee because when we had originally gone through this, we did not realize that this incentive was an actual payment to students. And that issue was brought up in the committee hearing. And I'm not sure if that had been, if that has been fully addressed. Is that still the plan? So I'd like to ask the Department of Education, the conversations that we had in the subcommittee closing, so the incentives that you're talking about are still actually payments to students who do complete? Is that correct? Is that still the same? Or are we looking at alternate incentives also?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Superintendent Joan Ebert. We appreciate the time that has been given us to work with the guidance counselors as well as directly with students themselves. The consideration for student incentives is still on the table. What I would say is through the conversation with principals, with students themselves, and with the counselors, I think there are some additional work that we could do to make this the best project for those students that are not able to graduate on.
And thank you, Superintendent. We appreciate you putting that on the record and the philosophy of putting in reserve so we can continue to have discussions moving forward. We know there's a lot of moving pieces in education going forward, and it's going to be tough to address every single one of them. So this gives us an opportunity to continue the work and see what we can do to help incentivize students, but do it in a way where we're not setting ourselves up for failure in the future. So having it be set in reserves and come back and have a conversation, I think is an excellent path forward. I know other committee members had some concerns about the second budget amendment, which is the donors choose. So Ms. Mangola, Mr. Drost, I just want to make sure that I have my brain wrapped around this the right way. So with donors choose, it is a 15% partnership cost, which the department has now negotiated down to 10%. But in addition to that 10%, there is a 1.5% third-party payment processing fee and the flat $30 fee. So that is in addition to the 10%, or is that encapsulated in the 10%?
Madam Chair, for the record, Adam Drost with LCB Fiscal. That is in addition to. However, upon reflection this morning, the 1.5% is related to credit card processing. So you may want to have the department confirm, since it does not appear the state would be providing the funding through a credit card payment.
Well, I hope we're not going to put this amount on the credit card. I've been tempted in the past, but they won't let me. So, Superintendent Ebert, could you expand on that, please? If that 1.5% is the credit card processing fee and this is a actual cash payment to donors choose, where are we with that in the contract with them?
For the record, Heidi Hartz. I serve as the Deputy Superintendent for Business and Support Services within the Department of Education. The information that we have for Donors Choose, which we have shared with your staff, included a slide that broke down their various administrative costs to support the acquisition of the things needed in the project requests for individual teachers. The 1.5%, what they're calling a credit card processing fee, is actually a fee that is incurred by Donors Choose as they make purchases in order to fulfill the requests for the different projects that have been selected for funding and put forward by teachers.
So if I understand you correctly, Ms. Hartz, then the state will still be charged within that $8 million, that 1.5% fee, because we will be matching a purchase, so we will still be paying that amount.
Heidi Hartz for the record, that is correct. When we enter into a contractual agreement with Donors Choose for the $8 million, that $8 million will be used to fund the projects identified by teachers and then to cover the 10% fee charged by Donors Choose for processing those requests, as well as the $30 per project for materials shipping, and then the 1.5% processing fee for their transactions as they place their orders.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that all committee members were on the right path. I have a number of questions. So with that, I will go to Ms. Benitez Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So this would be $800 per project, and then these costs, as I see it here, are also per project. So knowing that my arithmetic isn't necessarily always the best, could staff help me clarify? So am I taking 8 million and then subtracting the 10% and then the 1.5 and then the 30? Or is it of each $800 project, then taking that?
Madam Chair, for the record, Adam, as the department indicated, they did provide a slideshow documenting the costs. So the way the $8 million would be distributed is $6.8 million would be for the material costs, and that would be for the price of the projects themselves. $97,500 for that third-party payment processing fee. For project fulfillment, labor, and materials, this is charged $30 per project, so that's $300,000. And then there's that 10% partnership fee, which would total to $800,000.
So really, as opposed to an $800 per project, once you take all that off the top, it's really down to about $680 is what the actual, if you're the teacher in the classroom, you're budgeting at $680, you're not budgeting at $800.
If one were to take the material cost of $6.8 million and divide it by the planned 10,000 projects, that would be correct.
Thank you so much. And then this is, I've said it again, I know the people on the subcommittee are like, we already know what Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson's about to say. No, the department's like, oh my gosh, she's going to say it again. But once again, I struggle with using our state education dollars to nonprofits, because nonprofits are always doing good things, and I support our nonprofits so much. But I think that before you give to nonprofits, you gotta put the money straight into education so that we can accomplish that mission first. And so to me, this is so much of the conversation we're having on categoricals. You know, philosophically, I don't see a difference between giving money to a nonprofit and setting money non-side in a categorical. It's a dollar that's taken outside of our traditional funding plan for a specific purpose in a different accounting method. And so I think philosophically, if we're going towards throw it all into the big fund, I don't understand why we would put this all in the big fund. And then just to reiterate what I said before, on the subcommittee level, when I looked at the projects that were available in my area, Northern Nevada, there was one in my district, one title school that had a request up for a vacuum, which is like heartbreaking. But a lot of my other schools that are not Title I's were, you know, had some pretty big ask, and those are schools that I know are doing well with fundraising capabilities. And so I just didn't see, once again, if we were having a question, you know, philosophical conversation about equity, how we were planning for equity in these projects when it seemed to be some of our most affluent and sophisticated schools knowing how to kind of use this as a way to funnel through money as a tax deduction versus our Title Ones who are just asking for a vacuum.
And that was more than a statement than a question. So with that, I know I had some other members with comments. Dr. Titus.
Actually, I have a question. I haven't heard of Donors Choose before, so I'm new to this concept. And just maybe briefly, this is a profit agency that then directs funds into school programs. Is that correct? Just teacher.
Madam Chair.
Okay.
Mr. Drost, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, Dr. Titus, this is a website in which teachers create projects that they would like funded for their classroom, whether it be school garden supplies or adjustable seating, anything like that that they need for their educational purposes. Individuals can then donate to support that project on the Donors Choose website.
And I guess this is for the superintendent and maybe Ms. Hartz. Does the school itself not have a capacity to do it themselves? And so that's why they're using this third party to handle these kind of requests? Or I'm just anxious that I guess, as Assemblywoman Venus Thompson pointed out, that we're putting money somewhere instead of directly into where the program is. And when they apply for something now, they may need $800 or $800,000 or something, and they end up with $600. So to me, I'm just concerned about the off the top cost of a program like this, and I'd like to hear from the superintendent if they don't have the capacity to handle requests, and that's why this is more appropriate.
Madam Chair. Your permission?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Thank you. For the record, State Superintendent Joan Ebert, thank you for the question. So these projects that are constructed by our classroom educators vary in trying to be concise. They vary in the fact that they are specific to each classroom teacher's needs. And in the process, normally in a school building, if there are funds made available at the school level, they usually go to the school banker. The school banker then creates requisitions and then puts the order out. This eliminates that entire process within the school building, and it becomes then at a higher level. The benefit that Nevada has had with Donors Choose over the years, over $13 million worth of projects have been funded in the state, and we have had thousands of teachers, and we hope to have more than 10,000 teachers participate. And it alleviates all of those components of if I need to go get cotton balls from one piece, if I need to buy boxes for another project, if I'm buying butterflies, which some teachers do for their science projects. It eliminates the teacher work on it. The teacher does what they do really well, design the project, and then Donors Choose does all the other work for the teacher and then mails it to the teacher so they can conduct their lessons.
I thank you for the clarification, and I'm disappointed I didn't know about that before. Thank you.
And thank you, and Dr. Titus, this was one of the first times I had heard about it before. I have a couple of more, so I'm going to go to Speaker Frierson next, and then I have Mr. Roberts in the queue, and then I'll flip over to this side. So give me a moment, guys.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I was aware of Donors Choose, and it wasn't because the school district or the department told me. And so I'm wondering if we know if how many other states actually have Donors Choose. It goes through the state or the school district as opposed to relying on their own word of mouth and advertising so that folks can give directly to teacher projects.
Superintendent?
Thank you, Superintendent Ebert, for the record. I appreciate the question. We would be the first state to do it statewide. There are district superintendents at district level that have done these projects, but we would be the first state.
Follow-up, Speaker? Good. Mr. Roberts, and then I'm going to flip over to the Senate. Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm familiar with Donors Choose. I've used it myself. And when you use the platform, me as a donor, I get to look at the projects and I get to choose the project that I fund. In this way, not only are we taking a lot off the top, but there's no choice in the donors, like either on where the money is going. I'm just curious. You get $10,800 grants supposedly, or a little less, $600-something grants. Who chooses which teacher gets funded? Is it the platform? Is it a first come, first serve? How is that decided?
Superintendent?
Superintendent, thank you. Superintendent Eber for the record for the question. In this instance, obviously there is a maximum at this point in time with the 10,000. So we would be working with the school districts, with the teachers, with our stakeholders to make sure that there is an awareness of the availability of the projects. And then we will be working with Donors Choose on those parameters for approval. And then when the funds are fully expended, the program would end.
Follow up, Madam Chair. So you're actually going to be expending some manpower to facilitate this, in addition to the overhead costs that were given to Donors Choose, right? So you're actually going to be involved in selecting which projects get funded and which don't?
Superintendent Ebert, for the record, we would not be involved on a specific one-to-one. We would be setting the parameters for the state of Nevada of the type of projects that would be fundable, and then we would move forward from there. Yeah, and thank you. My staff was reminding me that these are federal funds, and also on top of that work, we'll make sure that it is in alignment with the expenditures allowed under the federal ARP funds.
And thank you for the answer. And it just seems like we're expending a lot of effort and resources, but we're still losing over $1 million of the funds to use their platform. And it almost seems like with a little more effort, we'd be able to get more money in the classroom rather than give it to Donors Choose. And I do like Donors Choose. If I would be acceptable if it was a matching. We put money in, and then donors would we would be the match for that. We'd actually leverage our funds to actually get more funds in the classroom. But to me, this is a little troubling. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Robertson. I know this is getting a little bit further than a subcommittee closing, but this is a big issue, and I just want to make sure everyone has all the information that they need. Speaker Frierson had asked to be recognized for a second time as a follow-up to Mr. Roberts, and then I promise, Senate, I'm coming to you. I'll get there.
I apologize, and thank you for the indulgence, Madam Chair, but my colleague brought up a point I wasn't really in tune with, and that was this. Currently, you can pick not only the school, but the teacher and the project, and this would prevent an individual from being able to do that, and you would just give to this pot, and the department or the school districts would decide? Is that?
So the state, it's my understanding, the state will fund us, and then the state will decide on the projects. It's my understanding. Can you confirm that for me, Superintendent?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Superintendent Ebert, for the record, we would be setting the rubric and the parameters for the allocation of the funds. We would not be examining all 10,000, but we would be setting the structure and then auditing in between on those funds, on the approval of those funds.
Thank you, Superintendent. That's what we needed. It's not an individual approval, but you're going to be setting the parameters by which those dollars will be used depending upon the projects that the teachers request through the portal, through Donors Choose. So it makes that clear. I promised the Senate I would come this way, so I'll go ahead and start with Assemblywoman Tolles. Oh, no, you're in the Assembly. I've got to go to the Senate. Hold on just a second. I promised the Senate I would go to them for some questions. She tried to sneak right in there, sitting over there with you guys. So with that, Senator Kekeffer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this is a really good platform for an individual or a business that wants to help a teacher, help a school. I worry about the scope, particularly as it relates to providing such like a gross amount of funding. And because the administrative costs really do stack up. If it's 10% plus, the sales tax is going to be charged because Donors Choose is making the purchase, right? If the districts were making the purchase, they'd be tax exempt. So we're paying sales tax on stuff now that we wouldn't be otherwise if it was through the district. And with the $20 fee, you're at a 20% overhead really fast. And I think that's steep for what the mission should be. And there might be a better way to get resources into the classroom.
Thank you, Senator. So with that, Senator Dondero.
Thank you very much. We've bounced around a lot today, and I would just say that just for terms of information, if you go to the Donors Choose website, they actually, under the financial link, have some really good information. One of the things that they do is they break down an actual project. So a teacher wants 12 chairs because her chairs are wobbly. And if you look at that, they break down exactly what happens with the money. So to those that were questioning that, and then I think that I hear everybody's angst with this, like I said, and I totally understand it. And I'm taking it all in. But I also know that if I'm a classroom teacher and the second grade teachers are going to go together and get science supplies, this is a way I can put in and get those science supplies and get $800 worth of science supplies for more than just one teacher. So I think we need to, while I get the vacuum story, maybe I ordered science supplies and my neighbor ordered the vacuum so that we could keep our classrooms clean. So I think we have to put that in perspective too, that sometimes teachers want different things for different reasons. Maybe it's an art teacher. So I just see the benefits I see the arguments on both sides, but I just wanted to put that information out there. Thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to do that.
And thank you, Senator. I don't think the concerns necessarily arise around supporting teachers and the projects that they want to do. I think it's more around the process, the fees, how the actual protocols in this will actually work is where I'm hearing most of the concerns. I think now that I've discovered Donors Choose, I'm probably going to be doing it a lot more in the future. I don't think this is anything about teachers and projects. This is more about just how do we get there, the path to getting there, and making sure that the dollars get to the teachers and to those projects that we want them to handle. So other questions from the Senate? I have Senator Severs-Ganser.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think we've discussed this, now quite a bit. But something that I noticed when I was on Donors Choose is that when you go through their normal process, there's matches. And so Google.org, Lakeshore Learning, Sonic, there's the different types of matches. And so I think when you're doing one-off projects, it makes some sense because while you're having to spend some money for the overhead, you're potentially getting matched. And the way that we're doing this, we probably wouldn't be in the situation where we could get matches. I also know that in the past, we've had times where we've considered or have had classroom dollars available, like $400 per teacher or per classroom available. And if our overhead is between, let's say, 15 and 20%, it will maybe worth investing in a couple of folks at the Department of Education level or some personnel to try to organize this versus going to the outside group. Again, when you have external folks deciding what they want to donate to on behalf of a teacher or a classroom, this is very transparent and provides information that will really help the teachers get what they need, when it's not available through the districts. But since we have the flip here where we actually have money, we may want to consider being able to roll that out in a sleeker, less expensive way, and using our staff basically to run something like that. Thank you.
All right. There were a couple more questions, but I think I can kind of see where we're going. So when we get to that point, I think I have an option that we might be able to use, but I will go to Assemblywoman Tolles next, and then I'll come back to Assemblyman Haven.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And mine was just a clarifying question for the superintendent. So if the NDE is not the ones deciding on a case-by-case basis who gets the approval of these funds, who it does?
And I believe the discussion point was NDE was going to set up the rubric, and then donors choose themselves would actually follow within those guidelines how the monies would be applied to the different accounts.
Thank you. So it's not the organization donors choose that's making the final decision. It's the donors giving the money to donors choose. That's what I wasn't clear about.
Oh, and I apologize.
We got the same wording between the organization and then the actual donors. So that's just the clarifying question I had.
Superintendent Ebert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Superintendent Ebert, for the record. So I think just amplifying the ability for everyone to donate, thank you, to our classroom getting these funds. So if you were to compare, the state would be the donor in this instance versus an individual or philanthropy.
Ms. Tolles?
Follow up, please. So who says, yes, this is approved, and no, this is not approved? Thank you.
Superintendent Ebert, for the record, we, the State Department of Education, would be setting up the rubric for the approval of the projects. We would not be approving each and every one of the 10,000 projects that would be funded under this proposal.
Thank you. Senator Ratty.
I just want to make sure that one thing is clear on the record. The entirety of this conversation would only affect the projects that are funded by this contract, correct? It wouldn't affect if I or any other Nevadan choose to get on Donor Choose and fund a project. Nothing that we are doing today would in any way impact those donations, right? Those donations are all still my donor decision to my school project of choice. Is that correct?
That is correct, Senator Ratty. This would have nothing to do with outside of this program. This is the state buying in, contributing to this program. Assemblyman Roberts, Speaker Frierson can still pick our prop. So it's not going to eliminate the option of the citizens of the state of Nevada being able to choose to go through this portal to support teachers and students in the classroom. This is in addition to the other work that's currently being done in the state.
Thank you. And I think we've been very gray on that in a couple of our question and answers. So I just want to make sure that that's very clear.
No.
This does not change the decision-making power of any donor, nor the costs associated with those donations. And I will say, if you go to the Donor Choose website, there is a very nice page that it gives you a transparent breakdown of what a project costs and tells you exactly how your fees and taxes and everything are handled for your individual project if folks are interested.
Yes, thank you, Senator Reddy. So with that, I had Assemblyman Nathan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I too use the Donor Choose website quite frequently. And yesterday, being that this is Teacher Appreciation Week, received an email that Sonic Drive-In was doing a 50% match in my area. And I know that there's been a lot of conversation on the match, but can I just ask the question, why was a match not considered like different organizations do, and why are we going in this direction?
Heidi Hartz for the record. The request that was put forward on behalf of the Department of Education is for the $8 million of federal funds that we would recommend designating for this purpose. We did not envision adding a maintenance or a match requirement to these projects. We wanted to hope that This would be a quick way of making these investments in classrooms to specific teachers who have projects for which they would like additional funding as quickly as possible. The goal is that these projects would be funded for our teachers prior to the start of the school year. And then we do hope that not only the great citizens of our state, but people around the world would then see the work that's being done within the state of Nevada and then contribute to these projects as well, or to other projects for which funding may not be available.
And thank you very much. So are there any other questions at this time? Assemblywoman Miller, and then I believe that will be our last question, and we're going to have some discussion on how to move forward.
Thank you, Chair. And I think on this particular issue, my colleagues have really deeply dove into it and the questions. My ultimate concern comes with the fact that when we're speaking about education and what needs to be funded and the different options and different holes that we have, I guess I'm really just wondering at the core how this came to be an idea or a suggestion, and if funding this, what other programs are we missing out on? Like, what will we avoid or be neglected? Because we also have a responsibility to Nevadans, and that includes all of our students, all of our parents, all of our educators, and everything in our state that relies on education. And I just feel like, is this something that everyone in the public is supporting? Is this something that we feel will get us to our ultimate goal by funding these projects instead of so many of the other direct instructional and socialization programs that we have that are much needed to be funded in education? Because again, $8 million is a huge chunk.
Superintendent?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Superintendent Ebert, for the record, I think as noted, this is the opportunity where teachers have the power to direct the funds and projects as they are doing the instruction and closest to the classroom. There are many projects that have been considered and still in consideration as we look at these funds that are made available, balancing that these are one-time funds, that they will not be reoccurring. Understanding that piece, this body has approved additional funding for our social workers, social emotional learning. When I link that pot of funds that have been approved to these funds as well, you have the direction of the state and the body for those positions, which we know are greatly needed, and then a teacher, and we've seen in Donors Choose, especially here in Nevada, where our teachers have asked for social emotional supports, books, projects, those pieces. So it's bridging those components together as you have outlined, as well as keeping in mind that these are one-shot funds. They are not reoccurring, and we do not want to end up in a fiscal cliff at the end of this work.
Thank you very much, Superintendent. So I believe with that, I'm hearing the concerns of the committee, not just concerns, but still questions on what direction to go. And the subcommittee did accept this particular budget amendment, doing so knowing that there were concerns and wanting to bring it to the full committee for conversation for everyone, not making a decision on this at the subcommittee level. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and go to Ms. Kaufman. I believe there's an option that we can all look at that will address some of the concerns and some of the questions that have arisen. So Ms. Kaufman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Sarah Kaufman. So with these three budget amendments, there's a total of $1.3 billion in coronavirus 19 funds being provided to the state. And I would point out that there was $56.8 million that was established in a reserve And I would also note that the subcommittee decided to add to that reserve the $2 million that was identified for incentives for high school students and the $150,000 identified for the Youth Career Path platform. So an option that the committees could consider is to perhaps add that $8 million to the reserve that was established, and then have the Department of Education come back to the Interim Finance Committee with alternative solutions on how to actually fund or utilize the remaining reserves that will be established as part of the coronavirus funding.
And thank you, Ms. Kaufman. And by putting these dollars in the reserve, it is my understanding that we're not tying it to anything in particular, but we're leaving our options open to be able to look at the discussion items that we've had today, but any other future possible items that may arise, so that the committee has the flexibility to address other ideas that might come forward to use these federal dollars, and cautioning the committee that we definitely want to use these in more of a one-shot ideal, not anything that would end up being rolled up into a base or ongoing costs. So that would allow us to have those future conversations, having these dollars in reserve as we did some of the others. So with that, are there any questions or comments from the committee members on that particular item? I'll take a comment from Senator Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that makes perfect sense, and do you need a motion to accomplish that?
I want to make sure that if there's no other questions and everyone understands what we're doing, and it seems like I'm getting a lot of head nodding yes, and some raised eyebrows, but other than that, I think we're good. So with that, I would accept a motion, Senator Brooks.
I think the motion is to place the $8 million from Budget Amendment A21586710 into reserves to discuss how those will be handled at IFC.
Okay, so with that, I have a motion from Senator Brooks, a second from Ms. Benitez Thompson. Any questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And any in opposition? Hearing no opposition, passes unanimously of the members present. So with that, Ms. Mangola, I believe we can go ahead and, I'm sorry? Ms. Mangola needs to finish the items on page 12, if you'd like to walk us through those. And then the chair will accept a final motion to accept the report in total with all the changes that have been made. So Ms. Mangola.
Thank you, Madam
Oh,
Chair.
I'm sorry, Ms. Mangola. I think,
Continuing-
I'm sorry. Senator Brooks had another question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry to interrupt. I wanted to get just a little bit of clarification, going back to the entirety of the COVID-19 funding. We have $1.3 billion of federal funding going to our K through 12 here in the state of Nevada, just to address issues related to the COVID-19 pandemic, in addition to all other funding that K through 12 will get. And so I just wanted to, if we could just really quickly, briefly identify the $1.3 billion, what pots did that come in from, and to make up the entirety of that $1.3 billion?
Madam Chair, in response, Adam Dross with LCP Fiscal. That funding includes $714.7 million provided so far from the American Rescue Plan funding, as well as Governor's Emergency Education Relief Funding of $30.6 million, as well as elementary, secondary, and education ESSER funding of $69 million, as well as $455.9 million. That comprises that amount.
Thank you, Mr. Dross. That's exactly what I was looking for, and so I mean that's a significant amount of money, $1.3 billion, in addition to any other funding that will go to K through 12 in the state. And I just appreciate you clarifying where that's coming from for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. So with that clarification, I believe we can go to Ms. Mangola for the final statements on this particular budget. So Ms. Mangola, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, for the record, Jeremy Mangoba. On page 12, the subcommittee recommended closing the following department budgets as recommended by the governor or as recommended by the governor with minor or technical adjustments. The District Support Services, Budget Account 2719, Department Support Services, Budget Account 2720, Standards and Instructional Support, Budget Account 2675, Gear Up, Budget Account 2678, Parental Involvement and Family Engagement, Budget Account 2706, Safe and Respectful Learning, Budget Account 2721, Career and Technical Education, Budget Account 2676, Continuing Education, Budget Account 2680, Individuals with Disabilities Educations Act, Budget Account 2715, and lastly, Account for Alternative Schools, Budget Account 2672. And thank you, Madam Chair. That concludes the subcommittee closing report for the Department of Education. And Mr. Dross and I are happy to answer if you have any other questions.
I'm hoping there are no more questions, Ms. Mangola and Mr. Dross, but thank you for being there and always being prepared for whatever question comes out of left field. So with that, committee members, I would accept a motion to accept the report with the noted changes as we have progressed through the morning. I would accept a motion from Senator Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that we accept the report for the Joint Subcommittee on K-12 Higher Education CIP closing report on the Department of Education with the noted adjustments and decisions.
I have a motion from Senator Brooks, a second from Ms. Benitez Thompson. Any questions or comments on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any in opposition? Hearing no opposition, it passes unanimously of the members present. We can go ahead and move on to our next closing, please. A subcommittee report. It feels like I'm going through a closing. Subcommittee report. I forgot to put, oh. So committee members, I believe everyone has the appropriate documents. So we can proceed. Good morning, Ms. Ryan.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Madison Ryan, LCB Fiscal Analysis Division for the record. Today, I will be reviewing the closing report for the Department of Business and Industry. So the Joint Subcommittee on General Government has completed its review of the budgets for the Department of Business and Industry for the 2021-23 biennium. When compared to the governor's recommended budget, the subcommittee's closing recommendations resulted in no change in general fund appropriations for the 2021-23 biennium budget. However, the subcommittee's closing recommendations resulted in a decrease in highway fund appropriations of $2,804 in fiscal year 2022 and $12,278 in fiscal year 2023. The following comments describe the more significant recommendations of the subcommittee. The first budget, Business and Industry Administration Budget 4681. As recommended by the governor, the subcommittee recommended approval of general fund appropriations totaling $685,432 in fiscal year 2022 and $701,038 in fiscal year 2023 for the support of 6.6 full-time equivalent positions and associated costs to continue the Consumer Affairs Unit contingent upon the passage and approval of Bill Draft Request 1094 or any other enabling legislation extending or removing the prospective sunset date for the unit. The next budget, Division of Industrial Relations, Budget 4680. The subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for an allocation from the Workers' Compensation and Safety Fund of $114,115 in each year of the 2021-23 biennium to offset the elimination of fee revenue related to the oversight of employee leasing companies, which is recommended to transfer to a different agency within the Department of Business and Industry, contingent upon the passage and approval of Senate Bill 55 or other enabling legislation. The next budget, Housing Division, Budget 3841. The subcommittee recommended approval of the transfer of the Federal Home Investment Partnerships Program from this budget to the account for low-income housing budget, including total funding of $3.9 million in fiscal year 2022 and $4.7 million in fiscal year 2023, and 2 grants and projects analysts positions. Housing Inspection and Compliance, Budget 3845. The subcommittee recommended approval of the transfer of 1 Chief Housing Assistant position, 3 Administrative Assistant positions, and 1 IT professional position, with associated personnel and operating costs totaling $401,802 in fiscal year 2022 and $409,801 in fiscal year 2023 from this budget to the Housing Division budget as recommended by the governor. In addition, the subcommittee recommended approval of the transfer of 1 unclassified affordable housing advocate position with personnel and operating costs of $103,823 in fiscal year 2022 and $104,135 in fiscal year 2023 from this budget to the Housing Division budget as recommended by the governor. The next budget, Real Estate Education and Research, Budget 3826. The subcommittee did not recommend approval of the governor's recommendation to eliminate 2 administrative assistant positions for cost savings and a corresponding increase in reserves of $113,027 in fiscal year 2022 and $117,669 in fiscal year 2023, but rather recommended the restoration of 1 administrative assistant 2 position to address increased workload and the elimination of 1 administrative assistant 1 position, resulting in cost savings and a corresponding increase in reserves totaling $54,643 in fiscal year 2022 and $56,891 in fiscal year 2023. In addition, the subcommittee recommended approval of a new integrated software system to streamline education-related business functions, funded with reserve reductions of $24,999 in each year of the 2021-23 biennium as recommended by the governor. The next budget, the Taxi Cab Authority, Budget 4130. The subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation to eliminate 2 vacant positions, 1 Public Safety Dispatcher 3 position and 1 Taxi Cab Vehicle Inspector 1 position that are no longer justified given current industry output, resulting in cost savings and a corresponding increase in reserves of $151,140 in fiscal year 2022 and $157,905 in fiscal year 2023. Additionally, the subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation to transfer 1 vacant IT professional position and associated costs to the Business and Industries Director's Office budget, resulting in cost savings and a corresponding increase in technology reserves of $90,428 in fiscal year 2022 and $94,766 in fiscal year 2023 for the Taxi Cab Authority. Finally, the subcommittee also recommended issuing a letter of intent similar to the letter that was issued by the 2019 legislature that instructs the agency to submit to the Interim Finance Committee a credible long-term solvency plan to align this budget's revenues and expenditures using existing revenue sources by the June 2022 meeting of the Interim Finance Committee. The next budget, the Labor Commissioner, Budget 3900. The subcommittee recommended approval of general fund appropriations of $3,973 in fiscal year 2022 and $22,141 in fiscal year 2023 to fund the reclassification of Administrative Assistant 2 position to a Compliance Audit Investigator 2 position to address increased workload within the Office of the Labor Commissioner, with the intent that general fund appropriations should revert back to the general fund if the Division of Human Resource Management does not recommend the reclassification. In addition, the subcommittee recommended approval of general fund appropriations of $18,350 in fiscal year 2022 and $6,950 in fiscal year 2023, as recommended by the governor, to fund the implementation of a labor certified payroll tracker compliance and workforce manager software system to reduce manual processes and increase efficiency. The next budget, Division of Financial Institutions, Budget 3835. The subcommittee recommended approval of the addition of 3 new full-time financial institutions examiner positions and associated operating costs to increase staffing levels to examine the steadily growing number of depository and fiduciary institutions under the Financial Institutions Division purview, resulting in reserve reductions of $232,100 in fiscal year 2022 and $295,007 in fiscal year 2023. The subcommittee also recommended approving an accelerated start date of the 3 new positions from October 1 to July 1, resulting in an additional cost of $69,368 in fiscal year 2022, funded by reserve reductions. Additionally, the subcommittee recommended approval of the migration from the current legacy licensing system to the nationwide multi-state licensing system, which would provide up-to-date functionality as well as a streamlined process for licensees and applicants, funded with reserve reductions of $41,500 in fiscal year 2022, contingent on the passage of Bill Draft Request 551095 or other enabling legislation. The next budget, Division of Mortgage Lending, Budget 3910, the subcommittee expressed continued concern over the division's projected reserve level, which is equivalent to approximately 4.2 years' worth of recommended expenditures in fiscal year 2023. As such, the subcommittee recommended the issuance of a letter of intent instructing the Division of Mortgage Lending to provide the Interim Finance Committee with a report prior to the commencement of the 2023 legislative session on how the agency intends to reduce its reserve to a reasonable level. The subcommittee recommended approval of all other closing items within the Department of Business and Industry's budgets, as recommended by the governor, with technical adjustments noted by staff, and authorized fiscal staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary. The subcommittee recommended closing the following Department of Business and Industry budgets as recommended by the governor, with or without technical adjustments. The Office of Business and Planning, Budget 4677, New Markets Performance Guarantee, Budget 4678, Private Activity Bonds, Budget 4683, Insurance Regulation, Budget 3813, Captive Insurers, Budget 3818, Insurance Recovery, Budget 3821, Self-Insured Workers' Compensation, Budget 4684, Occupational Safety and Health Enforcement, Budget 4682, Safety Consultation and Training, Budget 4685, Mine Safety and Training, Budget 4686, Account for Low-Income Housing, Budget 3838, Special Housing Assistance, Budget 3839, Weatherization, Budget 4865, Employee Management Relations Board, Budget 1374, Real Estate Administration, Budget 3823, Real Estate Recovery Account, Budget 3827, Common Interest Communities, Budget 3820, Nevada Transportation Authority, Budget 3922, Transportation Authority Admin Fines, Budget 3923, Nevada Attorney for Injured Workers, Budget 1013, Financial Institutions Investigations, Budget 3805, and the Financial Institutions Audit, Budget 3882. Thank you, Madam Chair. This completes the report for the Department of Business and Industry.
Thank you very much. So with that, committee members, we just did the whole thing all at once. If there are any questions or comments at this time, be happy to open it up to the committee. I think the subcommittees did a very good job on this, especially with their questioning and letters of intent. I always enjoy going through a couple of pens, signing all those, so that's really good. Seeing none, Senator Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that we approve the subcommittee closing report on the Department of Business and Industry.
Motion from Senator Brooks, second from Vice Chair Monroe Moreno. Any questions or comments on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And any in opposition? Hearing no opposition, passes unanimously of the members present. I believe we'll be going on to the Department of Tourism and Cultural Affairs next. All right, I believe everyone has the appropriate documents. Ms. Morris, nice to see you this morning. If you'd like to proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Nancy Morris, Fiscal Analysis Division. This morning I will be presenting the Joint Subcommittee on General Government Closing Report for the Department of Tourism and Cultural Affairs. The Joint Subcommittee on General Government has completed its review of the budgets for the Department of Tourism and Cultural Affairs. The closing recommendations of the subcommittee have resulted in an increase in general fund appropriations of $40,923 in fiscal year 2022 and $40,991 in fiscal year 2023 when compared to the governor's recommended budget. The following comments describe the recommendations of the joint subcommittee. For the Tourism Development Fund budget 1522, the subcommittee recommended approving the agency's updated room tax revenue projections of $38.8 million over the 21-23 biennium, which is a decrease of $1.6 million when compared to the revenues of $40.4 million recommended by the governor. Due to a decrease in room tax revenues, the subcommittee recommended approval of reducing transfers of room tax revenue to other budgets in the Department of Tourism and Cultural Affairs and the State Parks budget by $696,122 in fiscal year 2022, and expenditure reductions of $2.7 million in fiscal year 2022 and $99,117 in fiscal year 2023 in this budget, as recommended by the governor. Finally, the subcommittee recommended transferring an existing lease for the Division of Tourism's Las Vegas office to the Nevada Arts Council for an expenditure reduction of $169,854 over the 21-23 biennium. The Tourism Development Budget 1523, the subcommittee recommended approval of a $50,000 reduction in room tax revenue transfers from the Tourism Development Fund in fiscal year 2022 as recommended by the governor. The subcommittee did not recommend approval of reducing tourism development grants by $50,000 as recommended by the governor, and instead recommended utilizing $50,000 in reserves to restore available grant funding to $97,652 in fiscal year 2022. The Nevada Magazine Budget 1530, the subcommittee recommended issuing a letter of intent directing the agency to report its efforts and progress towards financial stability for the Nevada Magazine budget on a semi-annual basis to the Interim Finance Committee throughout the 2021-23 biennium. The Nevada Humanities Budget 2894, the subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation to reduce payments in support of Nevada Humanities by $25,000 per year for general fund savings totaling $50,000 over the biennium. For the Museums and History Budget 2941, the subcommittee recommended approval of budget amendment A214762941 to restore general fund appropriations of $81,914, room tax transfers of $100,117, and $182,031 in the commemorative license plate expenditure category over the 21-23 biennium. The subcommittee recommended approval of all other closing items within the Department of Tourism and Cultural Affairs budgets as recommended by the governor, with technical adjustments noted by staff, and authorized fiscal staff to make technical adjustments as necessary. The subcommittee recommended closing the following Department of Tourism and Cultural Affairs budgets as recommended in the executive budget, with or without minor or technical adjustments. Stewart Indian School Living Legacy, budget account 2601. Indian Commission, budget account 2600. Lost City Museum, budget account 1350. Nevada Historical Society, budget account 2870. Nevada State Museum, Carson City, budget account 2940. Nevada State Museum, Las Vegas, budget account 2943. Nevada State Railroad Museums, budget account 4216, and Nevada Arts Council, budget account 2979. Thank you, Madam Chair. This concludes the report on the Department of Tourism and Cultural Affairs budgets.
And thank you very much, Ms. Morris, and I'd like to thank the subcommittee chair and the members of the subcommittee for their work on this. These are the issues that we're all passionate about. This is all part of our culture and what we look at, and I know some of the conversations about some of these cuts must have been very, very tough, the same way they were in the Health and Human Services Subcommittee. So with that, I'll open it up for comments. I believe Senator Kickheffer has a comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. I recognize that a lot of the, this is room tax money. It's being moved around. Room tax money has also been, I know, reprojected, and certainly wouldn't want to vote against the recommendation from the subcommittee based on the knowledge they had at the time. But if there's going to be an opportunity to do some restorations in the future, I think some of these are incredibly important programs for the culture of Nevada and particularly the rural areas of our state. And it would be on my list to try to restore some of this stuff if we have an opportunity going forward before we close out in here in a few weeks.
And I appreciate that, Senator Kickheffer. I think you would get agreement pretty much across the board, front of the aisle and back on that, but decisions had to be made in a certain moment in time. But that time has now changed, and we can have those conversations in the future, and I look forward to having them. Senator Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I echo my colleagues' statements on that, and I look forward to taking a look at room tax revenue projections and having further conversation before we get out of here.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments at this time? Seeing none, I'd accept a motion, Senator Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that we approve the subcommittee report on the Department of Tourism and Cultural Affairs.
I have a motion from Senator Brooks, a second from Vice Chair Monroe Moreno. Any questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any in opposition? Hearing no opposition, passes unanimously of the members present. I believe our last item this morning is the Department of Veteran Services. With that, good morning. Ms. Day, if you'd like to go ahead and proceed, please.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Stephanie Day, Fiscal Analysis Division. I will be presenting the subcommittee report for the Department of Veteran Services this morning. The Joint Subcommittee on Public Safety, Natural Resources, and Transportation has completed its review of the Department of Veteran Services budgets for the 21-23 biennium. The following comments describe the more significant recommendations of the Joint Subcommittee. The first budget is Southern Nevada Veterans Home Account, which is budget account 2561. The subcommittee did not recommend approval of reductions to reserve of $1.5 million in fiscal year 2022 to add a chiller replacement project at the Southern Nevada Veterans Home, as recommended by the governor, since the replacement of the chiller system was approved by the Interim Finance Committee on January 27, 2021 to expedite the project. The subcommittee recommends closing the following Department of Veteran Services budgets as included in the executive budget with technical or no adjustments. The Office of Veteran Services, budget account 2560, and Northern Nevada Veterans Home Account, which is budget account 2569. Thank you, Madam Chair. That completes the subcommittee report for the Department of Veteran Services, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Day. Are there any questions from any committee members at this time? We do have Ms. Miller with us if we need, so I'm not seeing any questions or comments. With that, Senator Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that we approve the subcommittee closing report on the Department of Veterans Services.
Thank you. I have a motion from Senator Brooks, a second from Ms. Monroe Moreno. Questions or comments on the motion? I'll just make one comment. Ms. Miller, thank you for all of your hard work, and especially thank your staff. We can't imagine what the last year and a half has been trying to keep everyone safe and well. And we really do appreciate the long days and sleepless nights that I know all of your folks put in, and having them reach out to us on a regular basis to give us updates on what's been going on at the two veterans home. We greatly appreciate everything that you've done for the last year and a half. So thank you very much. So with that, seeing no other questions or comments, all in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any in opposition? Hearing no opposition, passes unanimously of the members present. I believe that concludes our work in subcommittee budget closings this morning. The only thing that is left on our agenda would be public comment. We probably do have public comment here in the room, and then we will go to public comment through broadcast services. So with that, Mr. Daly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chris Daly, Nevada State Education Association. Yesterday's meeting of the Economic Forum brought significant good news for Nevada's budget, a total of $900 million more and better than projected state revenue for this fiscal year and the upcoming biennium. NSCA hopes you are able to backfill proposed cuts to K-12 education and other important state services, including $156 million to class size reduction and $32 million in early literacy supports related to the Read by Grade 3 program. While the Economic Forum confirmed an improving economic picture, economic recovery alone won't fix the issue of chronic underfunding of public education, and the influx of federal funds, while significant, are only one time. We mentioned yesterday in the K-12 Budget Subcommittee, in lieu of new funding, that SB 543 created the Commission on School Funding, charged with recommending funding targets and identifying revenues to fully fund the associated cost. The Commission recently published their preliminary recommendations. We hope decision makers become familiar with this document. The Commission proposed reaching adequate funding by increasing education investment by $2 billion over the next 10 years. That works out to about $400 million in enhancements to education funding in each biennium, starting with this session. In their revenue plan, the Funding Commission focused on property tax and expanding the base of the sales tax. As a key education stakeholder, NSCA has participated in every meeting of the Commission on School Funding, both in person and by submitting comment remotely. We've heightened attention on the chronic underfunding of public education, including organizing 4 major rallies in Carson City in the last 2 years. And we've supported every serious revenue proposal discussed at the legislature for as long as we can remember, leading on several major revenue campaigns like IP1. On the other hand, SB 543 was developed behind closed doors, wasn't introduced until the 99th day of last session, had but a single public hearing, with the bill passing moments before sine die. This bill created the Commission on School Funding, which includes no active educator voice. But the process you put in motion with the passage of SB 543 recommends funding targets and a revenue plan to meet these targets over the course of 10 years. It's now up to you. Economic growth is not enough. Without serious efforts to pass new revenue to meet funding targets would indicate forces behind SB 543 never actually intended to deliver a funding plan to benefit all Nevada students. While wrestling with this ongoing issue of education underfunding, NSCA continues to call on you to fix our other policy concerns with SB 543 in 3 simple steps. 1, grandfather existing Zoom and Victory schools. 2, ensure hold harmless provisions actually do no harm to school districts. And 3, eliminate the anti-union ending fund balance language in the bill. Thank you.
So with that, if I could go to broadcast services, do we have anyone on the line wishing to make public comment this morning?
Chair, the public comment line is open and working. However, we have no callers at this time.
Thank you very much, broadcast services. So with that, committee members, our work for this morning has been accomplished. Thank you all very much for your time, attention, and participation, and we are adjourned.